The gaming industry is massive, with all sorts of games coming out every single day, and this was even somewhat true 10, 15, 20 years ago. Some games are good, some are bad, some are forgetful, and some are so incredible that not only do they revolutionize existing genres and subgenres, but even spawn an entire genre themselves, where to this day, for better or for worse, they continue to be the gold standard for the niche they ended up creating. In this case, though, definitely for the better. To say Dark Souls is an important cornerstone of gaming history is a huge understatement. What started as a tough-as-nails, niche, dark fantasy game with a cult following has evolved into literally spawning an entire genre of video games, which even borrows the name. You've probably heard the term Soulslike before, as since, well, technically Demon Souls, many studios have carved out their own little corner of the Souls-like section of gaming, with varying degrees of success, while the legacy of Dark Souls itself has led Studio From Software to such lofty heights that now, especially with the beyond smash hit success of Elden Ring, they are pretty much considered industry royalty. Hello, I'm Nazarbro, and welcome to The Backlog, a series where I tackle older games from any era that I've had on my radar but just never got around to playing yet. An issue I'm sure many of you can relate to. In this series, I'll play the game in full, or at least reasonably full enough, and see how it holds up and what I think about it in the modern day. Each game will be scored on a scale of 1 to 5 in 3 categories: gameplay, narrative, and presentation, with all 3 being added together for a final score of 15. In today's episode, I go back to 2011 to play one of the most revered and influential fantasy RPGs of all time. No, not that one. My history with FromSoft's games has been an interesting one throughout the years. While I have technically played Dark Souls 1 before, I never beat the game when I did play it back in the day. Actually, until I played Dark Souls 3 in the lead up to Elden Ring, Souls-like games really weren't for me, which was mainly due to the fact that I was hilariously bad at them. But there was always something that drew me in. Before I actually played Dark Souls 3 to completion the year before Elden Ring came out, I actually owned all 3 Dark Souls games and Bloodborne, but just never beat any of them. Dark Souls 2 I barely played at all, and don't worry, he'll show up in this series too. After beating 3 and realizing it was one of my favorite games of all time, and then Elden Ring only to realize it was also one of my favorite games of all time, I did at some point resolve that I wanted to wind the clock back and give Dark Souls 1, 2, and Bloodborne a fair shake at some point. Well, thanks to the remaster, that time is now, and I finally completed Dark Souls 1 after all these years. So, what is it like to play for kind of the first time in 2025, and does it hold up? Before we find out, let's go over some history first. Dark Souls was seen as something of a spiritual successor to Demon Souls, which itself was internally considered a spiritual successor to a much lesser known series, King's Field. The theme of dark fantasy has persisted through all of these games, and honestly, if you look at or play Demon Souls, you really do feel the proto-Dark Souls DNA. I can't really speak for King's Field though, I have no experience with those outside of what I've seen on YouTube and the rest of the internet. Like Demon Souls, Dark Souls was directed by a humble Hidetaka Miyazaki, a man that most would consider one of the developer superstars in today's industry. Inspired by other mediums of dark fantasy, Miyazaki specifically mentions Berserk as a big influence, which, yeah, that tracks. The team went to work crafting the various areas of the game with certain themes in mind for each, and gameplay-wise, wanted to retain the challenge that Demon Souls before it had presented to the world. The game launched originally only for the 2 consoles of the time, the PS3 and 360, in September of 2011 in Japan, and then October for the rest of the world. It didn't come to PC until almost a year later in August of 2012. The Prepare to Die edition on PC was the first version of the game I actually played, but the playthrough done for this video was all done in the remaster, which released back in May of 2018. Now, after playing Elden Ring so much over the past 2 years, I knew going into this that the game would feel sluggish and clunky by comparison, so I did steel myself for that. So, after booting up the game, what was it like to play through all of it kind of for the first time in 2025? This section of the video doesn't only cover core gameplay like combat, but other systems as well. If you're watching this video, you're more than likely familiar with how Dark Souls plays, but just in case some of you are not familiar, I'll be describing everything as if I'm talking to someone who has almost no idea. It's more fun that way. Dark Souls is a brutal game. A well-earned reputation, but it's not brutally unfair, or at least it's not supposed to be, despite how it may feel at times. The game is designed, I think, more so than many other RPGs, to be mostly fair, but also unapologetic. It certainly does not hold your hand, slapping it away and telling you to figure it out, but it does provide you with everything you need to succeed. Now granted, there are bits of the game that aged a little worse than others, but at its core, it's still a game that rewards thorough exploration, patience, timing, and the ability to sit back and think about what you did wrong, instead of mindlessly bashing your head against the wall until something changes. We'll get into how this actually plays out in the game, but before that, let's talk about the first step, character creation. So before even being greeted by the introduction cinematic, before being primed for the world you are entering at all, you're taken to the character creation screen, kind of reminiscent of a tabletop RPG stat sheet. You've got several options to tweak here. Of course, you enter your name, your sex, you tweak your appearance, and then you get to your class. Each class gives you a different distribution of stats, generally leaning towards a style of play different from the others, and I do mean slightly. You are also given a selection of equipment that leans into whatever stat spread that class has. Some classes are a bit more beginner friendly to start with than others, but if you instead want a blank slate character, you can choose Wretch, which starts with an even 11 across the board, and a simple club and shields. You can start at the absolute bottom, and 4 is your chosen undead however you like. All of this equipment from every class can be obtained in the game at some point, some easier than others, so there's not a ton of pressure on that. I'll break down all the stats themselves a bit later. After class, you can choose a gift, which is a little item from a selection that can be pretty useful or downright pointless. Some are consumable, some are infinite use. One of them created a massive conspiracy theory due to its cryptic description that endured for years, and one of them is actually a terrible idea for first-time players because it can very easily get you stuck in a much higher level area far earlier than you have any business being there. All of these items can also be found in the game through normal play too, so no pressure here either. After that, you're all done and are primed and ready to suffer. There is a sort of tutorial right after loading in and viewing the intro cinematic, but I'll get into that a little bit later. For now, let's actually get to the meat of the game. Combat. Fighting in Dark Souls is actually pretty simple, all things considered, but is also very easy to just completely make a fool of yourself and get owned. Every weapon has a light attack and heavy attack, and some weapons of the same type even have different heavies from each other. Weapons can be wielded with 2 hands that change up the moveset a bit, and in some cases allow you to let loose special moves similar to Elden Ring's Ash of War system. Since there is no mana or focus points, FP for short, as it's called in FromSoft's library of games, using these moves instead costs a concerning amount of durability from your weapon. I'll touch more on durability in a sec. You've got your other standard combat stuff. You can lock on and roll, block attacks, backstab, and parry if you've got a shield or a weapon that allows it. It takes some practice, and some enemies either can't be parried or are just very hard to, but if you spend the time to get the timing down, it feels so damn good. It also sounds great to pull one off. Both weapons and armor also have durability, which of course wears down over time and need to be periodically repaired, either at your boy Andre the Blacksmith, or at any bonfire should you purchase the repair box from either Andre himself or the undead merchant you can meet pretty early on. Once a weapon breaks, it's still usable, but effectively useless. There are also other repair options like repair powders and a sorcery that you can get much later in the game, but otherwise it just costs a small amount of souls, which if you aren't familiar with the Souls games, is pretty much indicative of the entire economy. Souls are everything. They are your money, they are your XP. You gain souls from killing enemies, from selling items, consuming bundles of souls that you pick up lying around. Dying makes you drop all of them, but you're given an opportunity to reclaim the ones you've dropped by making it back to where you died and scooping them off the ground. Dying again before you get there, however, means that whatever you dropped is gone for good. You will lose a ton of souls multiple times. Anyways, back to combat and equipment. If you forego the use of a shield, you can instead carry a variety of other weapons or tools in your left hand. You've got bows and crossbows, which are pretty finicky to use and are mostly just good for careful ranged attacks rather than in the midst of combat. And then you have your tools for if you're feeling a little more magically inclined. So, let's talk magic. The Dark Souls series breaks down magic into 3 categories: sorceries, miracles, and pyromancies. For my fellow big brains out there, sorceries are your intelligence-based spells, many of which are still blue in color like all the glintstone stuff in Elden Ring if you're familiar with that, and themed as soul magic. You'll be using a catalyst to cast sorceries, basically just magic staff. Miracles are the more cleric-leaning magics benefiting from faith, and mostly featuring support spells like healing, or the useful homeward miracle that sends you back to the last bonfire you rested at. These use talismans to cast instead, which are far more low-key than your catalysts. Finally, pyromancy is mostly all about fire, with a small amount of other support spells on the side. Interestingly, in Dark Souls 1, pyromancies don't require or benefit from any specific stats, meaning they are pretty versatile even for someone who doesn't build into casting spells at all. Pretty thematic for Dark Souls, to be honest, with so much focus on fire. These use a special casting tool called the Pyromancer's Flame, of which there are no variants, so this is your only one. The amount of spells you can have equipped is based on your attunement stat, and duplicates of spells can be equipped to give you more charges for said spells. Like I mentioned, FP is not a thing in the first Dark Souls. Besides weapons and armor, you also have 2 slots for rings, which grant myriad bonuses that can supplement whatever you're doing. There are a bunch to find and use, and I'm sure you can find some that help your playstyle even just a little. Now that you're familiar with combat and equipment, let me finally go over each stat you'll be leveling throughout your journey. Felt like it would be better to go over the core gameplay first before going over these stats to better understand what each one does. First up, Vitality, which increases your max health. Do not forget to level Vitality or you will suffer. Attunement grants you extra attunement slots as it increases, allowing you to carry more spells at once or carry duplicates to give them more charges like I mentioned before. Endurance increases your stamina and equip load, but also governs resistance to bleed damage. And then you get to the big main offense stats. Strength versus dexterity is probably going to be your primary offensive decision while playing, if you want to lean one way over the other. Both of these stats are required for most weapons, and some require and benefit more from strength or more dex. Do you prefer swords that are twice as tall as you and deal a ton of damage with each slow swing, or do you prefer smaller blades with a faster combat style? You could level both evenly if you wanted, but unless you sacrifice some other potential gains and other stats, you might find yourself doing a bit less damage overall. Anyways, moving on, we have Resistance, which boosts much of your defensive stuff, including physical defense and resistance to poisons. Intelligence increases your effectiveness with sorceries, as I mentioned before, but also benefits the damage of weapons that do magic damage, like weapons with the enchanted infusion. Don't worry, I'll talk about infusion in a sec. Similarly, Faith benefits miracles while also helping with weapons that have a divine or occult infusion. Those are all your stats for Dark Souls 1. Depending on how you like to play, you'll probably be focusing mostly 3 or 4 stats over the others. Last thing I want to go over in gameplay, and that would be smithing. Speaking to a few different blacksmiths throughout the game, you can upgrade not only weapons, but also armor pieces, using various different flavors of Titanite. Different categories of weapons, whether regular or special or forged from the souls of bosses, need different types of Titanite to upgrade, which you'll naturally find lying around while playing. Regular weapons can also be infused once you've upgraded them enough, which will change their scaling values to different stats. Basically, it allows a weapon to benefit from a different stat more than before, like enchanting a weapon so it gains magic damage, and then benefits from having more intelligence. This allows you to tweak weapons to fit a niche they normally wouldn't, and still allows a degree of variety for different builds, especially for those more focused on the magic stats. Like I said, if you're familiar with Elden Ring or any of the other Souls games, you probably know all this already, but it's fun to talk about it like I'm talking to someone who has no idea. I've blabbed on for quite a bit now, so let's actually take stock of everything and finally give this thing a gameplay score. Now I will remind you, I have played a lot of the newer games like Dark Souls 3 and Elden Ring. At the time of making this video, I'm actually going through a seamless co-op Dark Souls 3 run with my friends. So my experience with this game is kind of already biased because of how good the more modern games feel to play. That being said, Dark Souls 1 isn't particularly bad. Aged, sure, but it still works despite feeling sluggish. Rolling and jumping don't feel too good, magic feels a bit slower, and in general it does feel just clunky overall, but I think it still holds up alright. So I'm gonna say 3 out of 5 is my gameplay score. I'm comparing it less to Elden Ring and more to Dark Souls 3, and remember, this Backlog series is all about how I feel playing the games in the modern day, which inevitably means I might be more used to successor games or sequels or something, and oftentimes going backwards just doesn't feel good. Still, I think a 3 out of 5 for gameplay is fair. Like I said, it still works well enough to be enjoyed most of the time. This is pretty much everything related to what you'll be doing while actually playing the game from moment to moment. and big picture. It's pretty exhaustive, I know, and I probably did not need to go into this much detail. There is also some other stuff I didn't really talk about, like the humanity system, and just bonfires in general, but if you do hop into the game, you'll pretty much learn and pick up on those quickly. Either way, all of this information is important for your adventure ahead, and it is quite a lengthy adventure. Speaking of which, let's now head on to the next section, that being narrative. In this Backlog series, narrative doesn't just mean the plot of the story itself, but also includes things like the setting, how the world looks and feels, and the world building. However, if you know anything about the Dark Souls series, or better yet, pretty much all of From Software's Souls-like games, you'll know that the narrative is famously, or infamously, depending on who you ask, vague and mysterious, and this is by design. The game gives you a sort of starting foundation of the world right as you begin the game. Once some of the core events and the call to action are set up, the game does very little to outright tell you what is going on beyond that. Not to say there is no more story, but instead the story is your journey, your choices, your experience, and your character. They are in essence one and the same. So the story is not particularly set up in such a way that there is a traditional narrative. There are no chapters or acts, no quest markers, no narration, no quest log, and the only cutscenes are those to introduce bosses or show changes in the environment. Basically, the story of Dark Souls is the exploration of the world and the progression while doing so. You will meet a pretty diverse cast of characters while on this journey who will help paint the larger picture of the world, but you are expected to explore at your own accord, and the trial and error process of answering the question, where do I go next, is the game and is the story. Now, the world building is another story, no pun intended. From Software's games have taken on a particular reputation where the greater world of the games you are playing need to be pieced together bit by bit using small pieces of information that are found all over. Basically, almost all of the flavorful descriptions on every piece of equipment, as well as the context clues in the world and random bits of dialogue from all the different characters. These things, when put together, describe Lordran and the world beyond. It's not a process that everyone would care to go through, but there are many who enjoy this. The beauty of it is that those who don't really care about learning too much about the world, you really don't have to. You can progress through the game with the bare minimum knowledge if you're more of a gameplay-driven person, and it won't affect or slow you down. I do firmly believe, though, that trying to piece things together enhances the experience, however, and goes right back to what I mentioned before. Exploration is the story. Now, because the narrative is the journey, and there really isn't a plot to go over like in my previous video on Final Fantasy XI, I'll instead kind of go through the general progression of the game and my experience with it, with some touches of lore here and there. Of course, if you don't want to spoil yourself on the general progression, then I'll put a timestamp below to the non-spoiler section where I talk about the score. This is going to be the chunkiest part of the video. I didn't intend for this section to be this long, but as I just kept writing about my journey throughout the game, I realized that this is a massive document, so buckle in and let's take a look at what's going on in the world of Dark Souls 1.
In the age of ancients, the world was unformed, shrouded by fog.
Right from the get-go, the opening cinematic paints a bleak picture. In the ancient past, the world was ruled by big dragons with very hard scales, and the world was sort of kept in a cold and lifeless status quo. Then everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked. At some point in this ancient past, fire came into being, and effectively destroyed the dark status quo. Fire brought light and warmth, as well as life and power for the lesser peoples of the world that spawned alongside it. Enough power to combat the dragons themselves. This opening makes some important notable mentions of core characters. Nito, the first dead mortal. The Witch of Izalith and her coven of Chaos Flame Witches. Gwyn, Lord of Sunlight and his army of knights. And the mysterious furtive pygmy. After gaining knowledge from a traitorous dragon named Seath the Scaleless, these lords took fire on the dragons, using their various powers to put an end to their reign. After the war, man flourished across the world within the Great Age of Fire. After an undisclosed amount of time, the fire that gave mortals their great power in the first place now seems to be fading, which threatens to plunge the world into darkness once more. You play as an undead, a being marked with the dark sign, who may or may not be destined to do something great. So, I begin in the Undead Asylum, where a random knight helps me escape my cell by dropping in a corpse that just so happens to have the key that I need to get out. After escaping, making my way through the asylum, feeling bold enough to challenge the demon that guards the place without a weapon and failing miserably, I find the knight who helped me escape, Oscar of Astora, who informs me he has failed in his mission, which he then entrusts to me, to escape the asylum, travel to the land of ancient lords, and ring the Bell of Awakening. Ringing said bell will, in theory, reveal to the chosen undead their destiny. After giving me the Estus flask, which the Dark Souls community will tell you is full of Sunny D, Oscar perishes, and I make my way back to the asylum demon. With a full kit of equipment, I get my revenge, and escape the asylum. Then I catch a plane, or rather, the plane catches me, to Lordran, the land of ancient lords mentioned by Oscar before, landing at pretty much the hub of the game, Firelink Shrine. After arriving, I talk to this doomer over here who tells me that there are in fact 2 Bells of Awakening, rather than the one Oscar mentioned before. The first being up above the Undead Parish, the second being deep below in a delightful sounding place called Blighttown. I meet this lad Petrus, who offers to teach me some basic miracles, and then I loot the nearby graveyard. I then ascend up the side of Firelink and make my way into the Undead Burg, where I find this cheeky little merchant sells me some pretty useful stuff. Continuing through the burg, I get bullied by a Black Knight, die from fall damage after getting to the top, and then face off against the next boss, the Taurus Demon, who I managed to down first try. Moving on, I then meet the most incandescent human being I have ever seen. I try to cross the bridge, which, shame on me, really. I head under the bridge instead, make it to the Undead Parish, get killed by an armored boar of all things, kill it with fire, and then move up through the side passages. After an epic duel with this gentleman, I make my way through the nearby church and find a shortcut all the way back down to Firelink, which is huge. I have another epic duel with this absolute unit and find a very important NPC just beyond, Andre of Astora, the premier blacksmith of Lordran. Now I can finally upgrade my stuff, which is immensely helpful. Just across this narrow bridge from Andre is a massive locked gate with another fan favorite sitting outside, Siegmeyer of Katarina, the Onion Knight. After a quick chat, I head back up to the parish, explore a bit more, and come across this golden lad locked in a cell. Thinking I could help him out, I free him, and he offers to reward me once he has something to reward me with, which, yeah, fair enough, I guess. Atop the church in the parish, I'm greeted by a living gargoyle who invites his friend down to the party mid-fight. Asshole. Defeating the tag team gains me access to the bell tower and the first Bell of Awakening. My first major objective complete, now to find the second bell. I should point out that up until now, I was pretty familiar with where to go and what to do, for the most part. Like I mentioned, I've technically played some of this game before, but it was a long time ago, so as I progress I get less and less familiar. Anyways, moving on. I must have misplaced some footage here because I don't seem to have any showing me getting to the next area for the first time. Anyways, after exploring some more, I gain access to the lower streets of the Undead Burg, where I have to deal with dogs. And after suffering through that, I arrive at one of the few bosses that actually pressed me, this asshole Capra Demon. Look at the size of this arena, and the dogs, and the stairs. This was awful. After a bunch of tries, I did manage to down him, but at the cost of some of my sanity. This bastard of a demon gives me a key to the sewers. Great news. To be honest, the depths aren't that bad, annoying and a bit maze-like, sure, but manageable. Eventually, after exploring enough, I did find this funny-looking guy, who sells an interesting assortment of stuff. Just past him is a passageway to this huge chamber where I enlist the help of Solaire himself for the upcoming boss, the hideous, gaping dragon. Why? Anyway, Solaire and I get to work, and we down it pretty easily, despite feeling pretty tanky compared to the previous boss. Now here's where my unfamiliarity with the game really starts to show. After the Gaping Dragon, the intended route for you to take next would be going through this big door in the depths, which leads to Blighttown. My dumbass completely forgot about the door, and instead I start going around to other locations and eventually went somewhere I definitely should not have gone yet. Before that though, traveling back up through the depths, I did run into Laurentius, the resident pyromancy trainer, which was a nice bonus. Upon arriving back at Firelink, I see our Miracle Man has some friends in town who all seem to be gearing up to go, somewhere. After this detour back home, I decide to check out the Darkroot Garden just beyond Andre's place, which is a pretty location, I'll be real. Definitely a nice atmosphere change from all of the rundown cityscapes of the undead burg and parish. After exploring for a bit, I find my way down to this mysterious elevator, which takes me to a spot I definitely don't want to be at yet. So I go a different way and get mangled by this Hydra. So I instead go the proper way and find myself running away from living trees and walking statues. Summon this lovely lady for some assistance with the next boss, and face off against the Moonlight Butterfly. Beatrice makes short work of the big bug, while I die? All's well that ends well, I guess. I obtain my spoils and then just kind of wander around for a bit, trying to puzzle where to go. Again, I forgot about the big door just before the Gaping Dragon. I do stumble across Havel, the heaviest boy in town, where we have an epic duel. Exploring some more, I say hi to Lautrec, who is just so nice and not suspicious at all, and then I go down into the spooky New Londo ruins. Luckily, I was already aware that I needed to use these transient curses in order to do damage to these ghosts, something that took me an embarrassing amount of time to figure out back in the day. I won't lie. I threw myself into this ghost blender over a dozen times, I think, before finally making it to this gentleman named Ingward. This lad gives me some important information, saying that he guards the seal on the Four Kings, a boss fight I'll have to deal with a bit later. After finding a couple non-working contraptions and locked doors, I realize I probably need to go elsewhere first, and head back up to the surface, not knowing where to go. So I go somewhere I definitely shouldn't have. The catacombs. These catacombs sucked, and while I was technically free to go here at this point, I still felt pretty underprepared for this dark hole full of asshole skeletons and mages. A good amount of exploring and a couple of attempts later, I realized that maybe this wasn't how I get to Blighttown, and only a bit later actually returned to this door that leads to the stinking hellhole. I am very unfamiliar with Blighttown, but I know its reputation. And yeah, I'd say that reputation is warranted. Lots of awful enemies, precarious ledges, and sketchy drops and jumps. After suffering for a while, I did finally manage to make it to the bottom of all the sketchy scaffolding, which now means I have to deal with gross firebugs, and the Miyazaki special, a big poison swamp. At the very least, the damage over time suffered from the poison isn't actually too bad, and there was a bonfire down here, so it actually wasn't such a terrible experience. I explored for a while, killing a ton of these big leeches, and eventually find an item that will intrigue me, and kind of inform some choices I end up making later. This dragon scale. Eventually, I beat up this NPC named Mildred, and make my way to this big, horrifying mound at the end of the bog, and find myself in Quelaag's domain for the next boss fight. This is also where I see a cameo appearance by Let Me Solo Her. Just for the heck of it though, I summon Mildred to help me with the fight, and I am greeted by this horrifying, flaming, demonic... Anyways, Mildred and I get to work, and despite her very distracting visage, we down Quelaag first try. Alright, not bad at all. Besides the Capper Demon, I'm doing alright with these bosses. My ultimate reward is the second Bell of Awakening. Finally, my second major goal is complete. Ringing the bell has one immediate effect, opening that big gateway that Siegmeyer was sitting outside before, allowing me to access Sen's Fortress, my next destination. Before heading that way though, I make a detour and thanks to a helpful message, stumble across this lovely spidery lady, and a new bonfire. I also head outside into the demon ruins, and scope the place out for a bit, eventually end up triggering this massive boss to wake up, the awfully named Ceaseless Discharge. I absolutely fail against this guy several times in fact, and decide to come back later. I ascend up the other side of Blighttown, which takes a bit, and find myself on the far side of the Valley of the Drakes. I try my luck against this big undead looking dragon, and then decide to actually head to the gate nearby instead, which leads to the entrance of the New Londo ruins. Ignore that. I finally make it back up to Firelink, but see that the Firekeeper's dead? Which means the bonfire is out. The hub of the game no longer has a bonfire. Thank you, Miyazaki. Now that both bells have been rung, this gentleman has awoken, a primordial serpent named Frompt. Absolutely horrifying. He informs me of the rest of my destiny as the chosen undead, to succeed Lord Gwyn and relink the fire to prevent the world from plunging into darkness. The first step on this new quest is to find the Lord Vessel, which can be found in the Realm of Lords, Anor Londo, which can in turn be accessed after fighting my way through the newly opened Sen's Fortress. I also check in with Petrus, who informs me that his priestess that was there before has vanished, something that will come up again later. I make my way to Sen's and immediately get skill checked by these two snake bouncers, a sign of things to come. This place is a bit of a nightmare. Narrow hallways, traps everywhere, serpent men who for some reason seem to be my kryptonite. There's a lot going on here. After running around a bit, redirecting rolling boulders, some more ups and downs, I make it to the top and have some epic duels. Meet this gentleman that I completely forgot about after this, and then challenge the Iron Golem. I get him down in 3 tries, not too bad, and then get grabbed by these spindly assholes who kindly give me a lift up to the revered Anor Londo, the Realm of Lords. This is just about where my prior experience with the game hits a wall. Most of what happens after this is new to me. Of course, I know of certain things that do happen, and know of some of the bosses later, but I don't have any personal experience with them myself. Anor Londo is a beautiful palate cleanser compared to all the previous locales I visited. Everywhere else is in ruins, while up here, it seems to be nice and clean. Seems that way, at least. I meet this stand-in firekeeper who wears such an awesome armor set, and begin my sweep of the city. Exploring a bit, I find this golden barrier, which I figure will open up later, after whatever event is related to getting the Lord Vessel. So I fight my way through giants, gargoyles, ninja priests for some reason, those same winged demons as before, and a veritable army of silver knights to make it to the main castle. I run into both Solaire and Siegmeyer while here, who are kind of doing their own thing. I try some PvP, and then finally make it to meeting the giant blacksmith who can turn boss souls into weapons. After that, it's finally time to challenge the 2 uber dickheads, Ornstein and Smo. This was, without a doubt, the hardest fight in the game for me. No other boss came close, not even any from the DLC. I tried and tried, but I just did not have the skill to defeat them without assistance of some kind, at least not the way that I was. So I enlisted the help of the people's champion Solaire to assist. And though his intentions were good, sometimes he would just get stuck at the fog wall, or lose too much health to the giants outside, or something. After about 2 hours of attempts, I eventually enlisted the help of another player alongside Solaire to get the job done. Summoned a guy by the name of Cora, and with our powers combined, defeated these 2 bastards. After which, I was greeted by some classic messages, and granted an audience with Guinevere, daughter of Gwyn, who gives me the Lord Vessel and the ability to fast travel between certain bonfires. This is huge. Frompt freaks the hell out that I managed to get my hands on the Lord Vessel, and then vores me. Alright, somewhere deep below, we arrive at the Firelink Chamber, where I then place the Lord Vessel into its rightful place. This reveals to me all the locations around the world that I can now visit, after their barriers have faded. Frompt directs me on my next goal, to find the souls of those that are as powerful as Gwyn, to fill the Lord Vessel, which will open the way to then link the fire. My targets are the Grave Lord Nito, the Witch of Izalith, the 4 Kings of New Londo, and the traitorous dragon Seath the Scaleless. And so begins the great soul hunt, where I need to journey in several different directions to find each target. It was at this point, however, that I decided to take some detours and fulfill some other personal goals, just for fun. You see, I love dragons. A lot. And I thought that dragon transformation forms were only a thing in later games, but a friend of mine, who was watching me play every now and then, revealed that there is indeed an obtainable dragon form in the first Dark Souls too. So, I set forth to find the ancient dragon covenant. This involved me going down through the poison lake again, and then down a massive, hollow tree with some sketchy drops. This all leads me down to Ash Lake, where I find another Hydra, some murderous clams, and some basilisks that force me to make another detour down to New Londo to cure my cursed HP. While here, I actually also find that I'm now able to drain the water and end up meeting the Dark Wraiths for the first time. Love these guys. They're very cool. I go back down to Ash Lake and make it to the end, pledge myself to this ancient dragon who then gives me the partial transformation into the happiest dragon I have ever seen. I then show my loyalty by cutting off his tail to get a big sword that I am not spec to use at all. What followed was a bunch of grinding that I didn't really record because it took a while. To get the full dragon transformation, you have to donate 30 scales to the boss man. How do you get dragon scales? Well, besides the few that you can pick up around the game, you could grind these asshole dragons down in the Valley of Drakes, or you can use this dragon eye you get from joining the Covenant to challenge other players that have scales to PvP, which if you win, you then get their scale. After a ton of both dragon grinding and PvP, I did eventually get the full transformation, which I honestly like a lot more than the Dark Souls 3 or Elden Ring transformation. Just look at my tiny tail and wings. I didn't use it for the whole game, I used it kind of on and off when I felt like it. But with my new dragon form acquired, it's time to hunt some Lord Souls. And I figure I go after Nito first, since I did a bunch of the catacombs exploration earlier. It takes me a few tries, but I did make it to Pinwheel, which, yeah, that tracks. What follows Pinwheel was my most loathed location in the entire game. Seriously, I would rather go back to Blighttown than try to explore this dark bit of the catacombs. And yes, I did use the lantern, I just hate it down here. After suffering for a while, I did run into this friendly-looking gentleman, who is not actually friendly. Surprise, surprise. Down in this pit, I do run into the cleric lads who were escorting that priestess lady earlier in the game, fully hostile after going hollow. Taking them out, I do find the priestess, who thanks me from ending their suffering and gives me a miracle for my efforts. I decide to forgive Patches, thinking it will matter more later, and then continue trudging through the darkness. After like an hour or so of trial and error, I do get through this dark bit of the catacombs, and this chamber full of pinwheels and horrifying baby skeletons, to find a fog wall leading to our first major soul bearer, Nito. I get kind of flattened the first try, but then did much better the second time, securing my first big boy soul. After this, I realized that Firelink being powered down really sucks, and a friend of mine pointed me in the direction of what to do to remedy that. I traveled back to Anor Londo, and using an item that I completely forgot I picked up, invaded Lothric, the culprit behind the Firekeeper's murder. His cronies made things a bit difficult, but I did manage to get him eventually. With the Firekeeper's soul back, I resurrect her and bring the bonfire back online. Great. Next up, I decide to check out that previously sealed passageway in Anor Londo, which leads to the Duke's Archives, a massive library full of crystal guys and mages. This place wasn't so bad, lots of ups and downs, balconies and passageways. It was alright. Eventually, I fight through this crystallized lad and find Seath the Scaleless already? But I can't damage him or reach him or... Oh, yeah, alright. A fight I was scripted to lose, I guess. Awesome. Time for a prison escape. These spooky squid guards aren't so bad either, and after exploring a ton through the place, I find an imprisoned Big Hat Logan. Oh yeah, Big Hat Logan. Quick side note, at some point while playing, I remembered that I like using magic in most RPGs. And for some reason, I hadn't done so in this game. I do typically like to main mage classes or spec more towards magic in a lot of RPGs. I main mage in World of Warcraft. In Elden Ring, my first playthrough was full int build. It's just what I generally like to do. I always think magic's cool. I also then remembered that the Moonlight Greatsword is a thing in all of the Souls games, and figured I should work towards being able to use it when I get it. So I did a ton of grinding that I didn't record to juice my int, as well as progressed a bunch through Big Hat Logan's questline to be able to buy his spells, since I didn't find him before when I naturally should have. So yeah, that's why he's here. Explored some more, found a new bonfire, found the key to free Logan, and made it out to the courtyard, where I killed this gold golem that contained a whole Siegmeyer. Wait, no, someone else?
I am Sieglinde Katarina.
Ah, the daughter of Siegmeyer. Sieglinde. How adorable. Continuing beyond, I find the Crystal Cave, probably one of my favorite locations in the whole game, next to Ash Lake in terms of looks. As much as I like the aesthetic of the place though, I did die a ton. Very easy to die in here. Making it to the bottom in one piece finally, I find, once again, Seath the Scaleless. I know at this point though that I need to cut off his tail in order to get my Moonlight Greatsword, thanks to a hint that a friend gave me. But doing so proves to be a bit tricky. and the run back from dying is insane for this fight. You have to go through the entire crystal cave each and every time. Took me a few tries to pull it off, but once I actually severed that tail, I can actually finish the fight, which was a huge weight off my shoulders. Honestly, once I didn't have to worry about the sword anymore, the fight itself wasn't too bad. It was just the constant rotation that kept messing me up. Head back to Firelink, check in with everyone. Sieglind is here. I feed the 2 big souls that I have to the Lord Vessel, and then back to Anor Londo for an optional boss in the form of Gwyndolin, another child of Lord Gwyn. Very cool fight with the extending hallway illusion he casts. I know at this point, just from my general knowledge surrounding the game, that I should probably head next to the 4 kings, but I can't just go down there and face them as I am. I need to be able to abyss walk, which means I need to make another detour. I open this door with a crest that you can buy from Andre for 20,000 souls, and then head deeper into the forest. Some time later, after getting bullied by some phantom guys and journeying through some dense trees, I meet this really big cat. Nice. At the deepest reaches, I find the legendary fan favorite boss, the Great Grey Wolf Sif. I do manage to bring him down first try, and it wasn't until after finishing this whole playthrough that I learned it's best to actually do the game's DLC before facing off against Sif, for a few reasons. But unfortunately, I just didn't know that. Oh well, something to try in New Game Plus. With the Covenant of Artorias ring in hand, I can now challenge the 4 kings in the Abyss of New Londo. My first attempt doesn't go so well, and the run back is brutal. Luckily, I do manage it on my second try, and I gotta say, this fight is really cool. Just being in the pitch black void of the Abyss, great setting for a boss fight. Good times all around. That's 3 out of the 4 Lord Souls obtained, with the last one being from the Witch of Izalith. Now is when I return back to the Demon Ruins for a rematch with the Ceaseless Discharge. It takes me a sec to figure out how to best fight him, but once I do, he goes down pretty easily, now that I'm much stronger. Upon his defeat, I see that the lava levels recede, allowing me to do some more exploration. I am then greeted with the prime textbook example of early game bosses picking up extra shifts as late game regular enemies, since Capra demons and Taurus demons are plentiful down here. After fighting through them and descending into the ruins, I soon fight 2 bosses back to back that I don't think I've ever heard of when hearing other people talk about the first Dark Souls. This demon Fire Sage, which to be fair is just a flaming version of the Asylum demon, but then after him is this guy, the Centipede demon. I swear I've never heard anyone talk about the Centipede demon. Both of these bosses do go down pretty easily though, so maybe that's why. Taking down the ladder also rewards me with the orange charred ring, allowing me to safely traverse lava. Hallelujah. I also run into Solaire down here, who seems to be having a personal crisis. I then travel forward into Lost Izalith, a very cool looking location that is made into an absolute pain in my ass due to these big jumping demons, lava, and the boss at the end, which I'll get to in a sec. While down here, I stumble into Siegmeyer, who is in another pickle as per usual. He jumps ahead to try to clear the way for me, and I jump in to help, but I am killed from behind, which then basically causes Sieg to die on my return, which I later learn completely ruins the progression of his and Sieglinda's quest. Great. Thank you again, Miyazaki. Climbing out of the top of Lost Izalith, I then run into another sad sight, as Solaire has been consumed by a half-life head crab, and I am forced to put him down. I don't really know if there's a way to progress his quest to stop this from happening. Like I said, my experience and knowledge with the game really hit a wall quite a while ago, so this would all have to be something that I'd have to figure out in like a New Game Plus. Sorry, Solaire. After making it back to a previous bonfire, I travel back to the archives to buy the rest of Logan's inventory, which then triggers him going batshit crazy, forcing me to also put him down. In one sitting, Siegmeyer, Solaire, and Logan are dead. Miyazaki, why? After crying for several hours, I head back to Lost Izalith, where I get to challenge probably one of the worst bosses in the game. What remains of the Witch of Izalith, or rather what she has become, the infamous Bed of Chaos. This boss is so strange, especially in the fact that it saves progress between attempts, so it's expected that you take multiple tries, I guess? Either way, it took me a few to get the hang of this thing's attack pattern and how to navigate the holes on the floor, and then finally blow up the core buried deep within. I know there's like a trick or something that you can do that I've definitely seen online before, but for my first time I just did it straight with no cheese. Very weird boss. Definitely didn't like it. With the final Lord Soul obtained though, the path forward to the kiln of the first flame is opened. However, it's not quite time to settle things once and for all. This game has a DLC, which includes one of the top tier, fan favorite characters in From Software's whole catalog, which we'll get to meet in a bit. Now, if you're experienced with Dark Souls, you may have noticed that there was an entire area that I missed while progressing. That of course being the return to the Asylum, but also after that, the painted world of Ariamis. And this is because I straight up gaslit myself. I thought this whole time that the painted world was DLC, just like the one from Dark Souls 3. I literally thought this was the case until I got up to writing this script right now, when I looked it up and found out that Dark Souls 1 only had one DLC. So I ended up doing the painted world dead last. I'm an idiot. I know. Anyways, back on track, it's time for the Artorias of the Abyss DLC. Apparently this DLC originally launched with the PC edition of the game, and then consoles didn't get it until 2 months after that, which is really weird, since the console versions came out first, and then a while later, the PC version of the game came out, but that PC version of the game had the DLC already, and then consoles got it later. Very strange. You know what else is strange? How to actually access the DLC. First, I have to head down to the big lake in Darkroot, the one with the big Hydra. I then have to kill the damn thing, skirt around the left edge of the lake, and reach this cave in the back where a gold golem is hanging out. Taking this thing down, out pops an NPC, Dusk of Ulasil. After speaking with her, I then have to travel to the Grand Archives and defeat this golem that's just watching paint dry, I guess. Then, returning to where I freed Dusk, there will now be a portal. I get absolutely yoinked by a big spooky hand, and I've arrived in the DLC. I am immediately met with a boss, the Sanctuary Guardian, who immediately feels so much different from all the other bosses I have fought so far. He's moving different. This boss and Artorias later feel way closer to how more modern bosses feel in FromSoft games. It's actually a very cool boss. I enjoyed the fight a lot. It takes me 2 tries to bring him down, and then I am allowed to progress through these ruins where I meet this lovely lady, Elizabeth, whose dialogue reveals that I have traveled very far back in time indeed. Progressing further, I see that the first big chunk of this DLC takes place in a reflection of the Darkroot Garden that I'm already familiar with. After exploring for a bit, I get jump scared by this big ass dragon who I just completely miss in this playthrough and didn't end up killing because I forgot about him. Whoops. After getting my bearings and some classic trial and error exploration, I do manage to find the entrance to this big coliseum, where I also find this very lost Bloodborne NPC. What the hell is this guy's deal? Just a merchant? Anyways, entering the coliseum, I finally get to meet the legend himself, Artorias. I've heard so much about this guy, and I've seen the admiration for him from the people who have played Dark Souls a ton. And yeah, I can definitely see the appeal. The fight itself is really fun too. Very much feels like a more modern FromSoft fight like I mentioned earlier. Readable animations and pattern recognition more so than any other boss in the game, I feel. It took me a total of 4 tries to get him down, with each attempt learning more about his attacks. Very satisfying to fight, and I really did enjoy it. Like many, probably my favorite fight in the whole game. What follows Artorias is a brutal descent into an insane townscape with some awful enemies. The vibes are immaculate though. Lots of ups and downs like usual, backtracking and going around, not so bad, and not really much else to say about it either. Other than the fact that it did seem to feel like it was getting darker the deeper I got down into this place, which makes a lot of sense. Making it to the bottom, I'm greeted by pure and utter darkness. Thinking this was a Four Kings situation, I walked straight off the edge. And then I realized, oh, I didn't have the Abyss walking ring on. I'm an idiot. So I put it on and tried again. But can you really blame me for trying? Come on, guys. Anyways, as for the Abyss, I'm not a huge fan of trying to pathfind in complete darkness, but here we are. At least it's not really as dark as the latter bit of the catacombs. Anyways, I explore for a bit and find these floating humanity-looking enemies very cool. I like the look of them a lot. And find a shortcut back up to the Artorias arena, where I see someone has arrived to lay him to rest. Deciding to be a good boy, I give up Artorias' soul to lay him to rest and get these 2 weapons in exchange. Probably would have popped off if I was doing a dex build for this. I meet this big fella who I later learn after my playthrough's finished that he would have helped me take down the big black dragon. But of course, I'm an idiot and completely forgot about that thing. So I head back down into the darkness where I spend some more time looking around until I finally come up on the boss. Now from my general knowledge of this game, I do know who I'm up against, I just don't know how the fight actually goes. Entering through the fog, I get yoinked once more and meet face to face with Manus, Father of the Abyss. He makes pretty short work of me. Second try, I was a lot more cautious, watching his moves a bit closer. Third time, he gets me again pretty easily. Fourth time, I get further than ever before. Fifth attempt, even closer. And then on my sixth attempt, I finally nail it, bringing him down. Really fun boss fight. Just like Artorias before him, I could really feel myself getting better and learning how to dodge the attacks better and the patterns of the attacks and everything. Super satisfying. And a pretty cool conclusion to the DLC. Like I mentioned before, just completely missed the dragon. We'll ignore him. I find Duskull curled up in the aftermath who doesn't really say anything, so I instead travel to check in with my favorite mushy, Elizabeth. She thanks me, mentions she'll remember my actions forever, and bids farewell as I head off into the sunset. All in all, given the scope of the base game, this DLC was pretty excellent. Great boss fights, cool loot, and some really interesting locations. I did miss some stuff, like how I learned after the fact that you can actually find a small Sith down in the Abyss, who can then help you fight Manus. So that's just more stuff to do in New Game Plus or something. Leaving the DLC, I then make preparations to get to the Painted World, the place I incorrectly thought was a second, much smaller DLC. That's what I get for thinking. First, a quick return to the Undead Asylum by way of Giant Bird, something I could have done way earlier. Now I can open this locked gate that was right before plunging into the Asylum Demon, and head into a different wing than before. Looking around for a bit and being a bit confused, I eventually, literally, stumble on another demon below the ground. Regaining my composure, I kick his ass and make my way to the original cell that I started the game in, now finding a peculiar doll. This thing will allow me to travel to the Painted World itself. I now head back to Anne Orlando, and in the big hall full of all the priest ninjas, I make it to this massive portrait, where I can now enter into it like a portal. I have now arrived in the not DLC Painted World of Ariamis. I won't dwell on this location too much since it's pretty short, but it was a neat kind of self-contained puzzle location, like going up and down different buildings, the sewer bits with the asshole skeletons, and fighting some unique enemies like these crazy looking crow dudes. It was interesting for sure. All in all, I did manage to do the revisit to the asylum and the entirety of the Painted World in about an hour or so. The big undead dragon on the bridge did jump scare me, and I didn't think it would charge forward. Crossing the bridge, I run into everyone's favorite dragon waifu, crossbreed Priscilla. I speak with her and then jump off the edge behind her. I come back to face her again, and actually fight her this time. I did try my damnedest to cut off the tail, but I just did too much damage and ended up killing her first. And I felt pretty awful doing it. I'm sorry, Priscilla. Blame Miyazaki, he made me kill you. And with that done, I was now pretty satisfied with everything. Sure, there may have been some smaller things I missed here and there, but I was ready to finish this. I should have held off and made sure to sweep for things like Titanite slabs, unique weapons, and then killing all the NPCs like a monster to get all the unique drops, because I would like to get all the achievements, and they'll all be back in New Game Plus anyway. But I just didn't think about doing it at the time, and I really wanted to wrap things up. So I return down to the Lord Vessel and journey past it into the Kiln of the First Flame. This final location is pretty sweet. Definitely does kind of get that vibe of a JRPG final boss area. It's also pretty straightforward to the final confrontation. Fighting through some final Black Knights, I arrive at the fog wall and see multiple messages encouraging me to try parrying. So I figure it's worth a shot. No cutscene. The fight is just on, with Gwyn, the Lord of Cinder. He catches me off guard at first and almost gets me, but once I regain my footing and my HP, I try parrying like the messages outside suggested. And it works a little too well. Gwyn fights like an enhanced Black Knight, with decently telegraphed moves and timing that feels like it makes sense. He almost got me a few times, but yeah, I kind of parried him into oblivion. An anticlimactic way to defeat the final boss, to be sure, especially with the very cool arena and somber music, but hey, he was retired. Afterwards, I go and link the fire, extending the Age of Fire and taking Gwyn's place as the Lord of Cinder. Spoiler section over. So I'm not going to dwell too much more on the narrative segment anymore because boy, this script is getting long. Suffice it to say, the progression through the game felt great, like how From Software's games always do. In this case specifically, Dark Souls is so revered that I have picked up on things over the years, but it has all been a mismatch of random knowledge, so it wasn't a completely blind playthrough, and more of a filling in the massive gaps and piecing everything together like a puzzle. That being said, going through one of From Software's Souls-like games for the first time is always peak gaming for me. 5 out of 5 for the section is called narrative, but I talked about that earlier. Holds up even today. If you've only ever played Elden Ring, Dark Souls games aren't big and wide open worlds that you traverse great distances in, but rather much tighter, more focused locations, all connected together via specific pathways, so exploring is more of assembling the areas together with shortcuts and opening connections to travel around quicker. It's a much different style of exploration, but one that might even be more satisfying sometimes. Of course, the progression is helped a ton by lots of other factors such as atmosphere, subtle and not so subtle music, and the unique aesthetic of each region, which does lead me into my next section, presentation. I'll keep this bit short and sweet. From Software's games are and always have been king of atmosphere. Everything about this game really does make you feel just hopeless. Barring the small handful of friendly NPCs that very often have a bad time, most enemy types are either crusty undead soldiers, demons, or some other kind of terrifying abomination. The world is in ruins, with every corner being hostile, and very few places that even feel a little safe. I'll tell you what it feels like to me, like a doomed timeline what-if scenario. Like what if the hero of a fantasy setting that is a lot more brighter and optimistic failed to save the world, and now you're fighting through what's left. A doomed timeline. That's what Dark Souls feels like to me. And somehow it feels like this all throughout the varied types of locations. Sure, there are a ton of city ruins like the Undead Burg and the Undead Parish, with the sewers being part of that, but you've also got the deep forest of Darkroot to contrast that, and then the lava-filled demon ruins to contrast that in a different direction. And Orlando is then something of a great palate cleanser, with a glimpse of what the world would look like if it weren't a doomed timeline. Every location tells its own story, and it all really cohesively sells the setting very well. A+ for me. Now in terms of sound design and music, we're also eating good. Dark Souls has some great dark fantasy, gothic tunes that really get the blood pumping, especially when fighting certain bosses. Most of the time though, it's tough to appreciate it when you're in the middle of trying to not die. Outside of boss fights though, there actually isn't much music at all. Firelink Shrine is where you'll really only hear other music. A slow and somber track which emphasizes the hopeless feelings. These games intentionally don't have much overworld music, or any at all, I assume to kind of better attune yourself to your surroundings, hearing things like the echoes of your movement in cavernous chambers or the sounds of enemy footsteps, stuff like that. Fair enough, I guess. In terms of UI, it's pretty minimalistic. You've got all your items and everything that you could possibly need down below. All the information is available on screen, and in the remaster, you can also scale all of this to a size of your liking. This does allow it all to just be as unintrusive as possible. Taking all of this into account, it does sound like some high praise, doesn't it? 5 out of 5 for presentation is my score, which means we now have our total. For Dark Souls, playing it all the way through for the first time in 2025, scoring it in gameplay, narrative, and presentation, we arrive at a final score of 13 out of 15. Dark Souls still holds up quite well in the modern day. Although, if you go back to it from something like Elden Ring, Dark Souls 3, or even possibly the recently announced Dusk Bloods, it will definitely feel clunky and slow. It will take some getting used to for sure, but it is genuinely worth it in my opinion, just to see where the series came from and why it is revered so much, for better or for worse. Before wrapping up, there are some other things to keep in mind if you're thinking about hopping in to check the game out. Because this game is so well loved, you will find that even today it still has a healthy community. People still play every day, and you are almost guaranteed to find plenty of summon signs outside each boss room. The game is also incredibly well documented, so if you have questions, all of the answers you could possibly have are out there. The game is also readily available on every platform thanks to the remaster. PC and all the consoles, even Nintendo Switch. So really, wherever you play games, it's there for an alright price of 40 USD. It goes on sale every now and then too, so pick it up whenever you feel like. Of course, the multiplayer works like other FromSoft games, which is to say kind of goofy in terms of being able to play with your friends. I don't really like too much how the multiplayer works in FromSoft games, where it only works in certain areas, and as soon as you defeat the boss, co-op time is over, but it also opens you up to PvP, which is not optional. I just don't like it. I like to play these as a co-op game with my friends. But FromSoft games do sometimes feel like they're actively preventing you from doing that. However, if you do like playing games with friends, there is some great news in that the modder Yui, famed for creating the seamless co-op mods for Elden Ring, Dark Souls 3, and even Armored Core 6, is also, at the time of making this video, making one for Dark Souls 1. Huge news. It may even be out by the time this video is live, because Yui is an insane person. I say that with the highest amount of respect. Even though I just played through the whole game, I would definitely do it again with my friends. So basically, the game is good, and you can just go play it, and I do recommend checking it out if you're a fan of modern Soulslike. Sure, I got frustrated every now and then for falling down, or rolling the wrong way, or missing an attack, but I did those things in Elden Ring too, so it's nothing new. It might feel slightly worse in Dark Souls because of how much older the game is, but I still enjoyed my time very much. I'm even now considering playing through the game 1 or 2 more times just to get all the achievements too. And I'm not really a huge achievements or trophy guy for the most part. Usually reserve that honor for games I really like. So to recap, I scored Dark Souls a 13 out of 15, playing it all the way through for the first time in 2025. It's a legendary game that has done more than just leave its mark, but has created an entire genre of games that carries its name, ensuring that its legacy lives on. If you enjoyed listening to me ramble about my experience playing this game and look forward to more, like the video to let me know and subscribe to stick around. If you watched all the way through, you're a legend. And now, after finally deciding to check out the origins and predecessor of one of my favorite games of all time, I can say that my name is Nazubro, and that's another game off my backlog. Up next for the backlog, I've got 2 more videos coming at you. I continue my adventure in Vana'diel by completing Final Fantasy XI's first expansion, The Rise of the Zillard, to see what the first post-launch steps were for this legendary MMO. And then after that, we do something a little different, switching gears and going digital, as I check out something a bit more niche, the turn-based monster collecting tale and one of the highest regarded Digimon games available, Digimon Story, Cyber Sleuth, and its follow-up, Hacker's Memory. Different vibes to my previous videos, but still a ton of fun. Until next time, cheers.